to our midweek technical analysis video. So jumping straight into things from where the market originally opened up this week, which was this candlestick here. You can see that we had extreme bullish momentum upon market open, carrying price to our first point of interest at around 4,405. Price came to this area, as we spoke about in our last video, tested it as a resistance, and then we saw a clean break of structure with price finding resistance at our next point of interest. We then saw price drop back down to the previous point of interest where price tested as a resistance, and we noticed that price ended up testing this level as a support, indicating to us at the time that we were going to see the previous high broken past, and in fact that is what we saw. We then saw price consolidate through sort of lower volume hours until the Asian session kicked in, and we saw some more bullish momentum and bullish volume kick into the markets and pushing price to our next point of interest. As you can see, price ended up finding resistance at this level, rejecting off and finding a support on this previous resistance just as the London session began to start. Once the London session began, we then saw some more bullish momentum carrying price even higher, pushing to our point of control, which we established in our last video. So we established our point of control by dragging it from this candlestick here all the way up until this candlestick here when we saw price retest this area as a support. As you can see, price did come back to this point of control, this previous point of control, and as you can see, price ended up rejecting off of this area as a resistance level. Now, one thing I will do is I'll go ahead and drag this fixed range volume profile into the future, just so you can see really where the new point of control is in for this entire this overall sort of move or this overall price action. And as you can see, it's just sort of solidified our overall conclusion of price finding resistance at our point of control. So as you can see, if I go ahead and look a little bit closer, you can see that our value area high is just above our point of control, or our POC as well. So price came up to test this level. We had one little push towards that value area high, and then price rejected, fell back past the point of control, and then what we expected to happen at this moment in time when this took place, we expected price to test as a support. So one thing I will do real quick is I'll just show you what I can see, because some of you will not be able to see it yet. So I'll start from here. So as you can see, we had a resistance found at a point of interest, and price broke structure and then tested as a support level. What I'll go ahead and do is I will copy and paste some of these, and you can just see as I line these up, you can see the same sort of thing happening. So price pushes to one of our points of interest, we get a rejection as resistance, and then price drops back down, pushes back up, finds a new resistance level, and then tests on previous resistance or the previous higher high as a support level. And you can see that same sort of thing happen again. So this is obviously a little bit less of sort of a higher high to higher low situation going on here. As you can see, the difference between this higher high and this higher low, and then this higher high. The higher low isn't much, it isn't too far away from our original higher high. So, but it's still valid. The pattern is still valid. So you can see that price ended up breaking structure of this higher low, broke structure, broke past the previous higher high, and then came back down to test it as a support. So you can see that's that same sort of formation constantly throughout the market up until this point here. If I go ahead and just copy and paste this one and drag this here, so you can see that originally we saw that same thing. So we saw that higher high created, we saw price test on a previous higher high or test on resistance as support. We then saw a break of structure of the previous higher high. I hope you're still with me. And then price push up to our point of control. We did see a break of structure within our point of control, but you can also see now that I've dragged the fixed range volume profile further into the future, you can see that those rejections where price could not pass was our value area high. And then as you can see, we did not see the retest as support. So we had this nice formation here where we saw higher highs and higher lows and consistent breaks of structure until we reach obviously this point here. What I'll go ahead and do is I'll just delete all of these eclipses just so we have a bit of a cleaner chart. So as you can see, where we're currently at now, price has flipped in terms of, and when I say flipped, I don't mean the market's going to drop all the way down to back down to the 3000s. No, I just mean in terms of this overall bullish move here, price has now broke structure and flipped. As we just spoke about, we created higher highs and higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. What I will actually do, just so you can have a little bit of a clearer look, and I can keep this on the chart as well, you'll see a sort of rough pattern start to form until obviously we then saw our flip. So again, higher highs, higher lows, higher lows, breaks of structure, etc., etc. But you can see that the reason why price flipped, or the reason we know that price has flipped in terms of the overall price action structure that we saw in this bullish move, is because you can see that price did not create a higher low on a previous higher high. So we saw that break of structure, price came back down to test it, and as you can see, that psychological assumption happened within sort of these two candlesticks here. People saw that this was a consistent structure and expected the same sort of thing to happen here, but as you can see, sellers ended up taking control a few hours before our London session today and drove price all the way down to a previous level of resistance. As you can see, then price ended up continuing on bullish after we saw that bearish drop, tested at this same level as a resistance, and then we have seen a rejection down where price is consistently now testing the support of around 4,440. One thing I will say is you can see that we have some moderately big candlesticks. So this is exhaustion. So this is the sellers trying to push price further. However, the buyers have ended up stepping in and taking control towards the end of the candlestick, as to the reason you can see these big wicks here. What I will go ahead and do now is I will drop down to our minute 15 time frame, and we will go ahead and delete this path now as we are on our lower time frame. And what we will also do is we'll delete the fixed range volume profile, just so we can have a closer look as to where we currently are right now. So you can see the wicks that I just spoke about are now bodied candlesticks. As we have dropped down to a lower time frame, you can see that price pushed down and then the buyers pushed price all the way back up more or less in the next candlestick. We can also see, and we can also notice, if I go back to our hourly time frame, we can see a head and shoulders form. So we have our left shoulder, we have our head, and then we have our right shoulder. So for our head and shoulders to work, we need it to break the neckline. And for us to establish the neckline, we test off of the lowest point of the left shoulder, or if you're looking at a bearish market, the right shoulder. So we're looking at the left shoulder, the absolute bottom side of that left shoulder, which is here. And then we're going to drag that to the absolute bottom side of the right shoulder. But make sure that you do not cross any candlesticks, and you just want to sort of have as many wicks going through, so your line going through as many wicks as you possibly can, and it will look something like this. So that's our neckline. If I go ahead and put this in a nice bright color like blue, and we can just sort of keep this here. So what we'd expect to see here is a break of this neckline and then price continue on bearish. So what we'd see is price drop below this neckline, come back up to test it as a resistance, and then drop further down. That's sort of how a head and shoulders tends to work. But as you can see, sellers have tried to push price down, and buyers then push price back up. But the overall area in which price has been pushed back down to isn't necessarily a break of that neckline. As you can see, our neckline sort of finishes here, and the candlesticks, if I get a closer look, the candlesticks are above this neckline. So what we would actually need to see is we would need to see the break happen at some point here, and we'd need to see a solid candlestick. So we need to see a bodied candlestick finish anywhere below the neckline, and then potentially on a lower time frame, we see the buyers try to take control for a moment. They momentarily gain control, price pushes back up to our resistance level and then rejects off, and we see this sort of move happen here. However, one thing I will say, we don't base trades off of just one confirmation. We are going to look for at least a few. And it was inevitable that after this bullish structure that we saw, of how, especially with how clean it was, we was definitely going to see that flip, and that is what we have seen. But with the size of these candlesticks, it is an indication that the buyers are trying very hard to take control of the market as of right now. So there is definitely a potential move for this overall head and shoulders pattern to invalidate and price to push back up to around 4,470, which is the sort of the top of the shoulders of that head and shoulders pattern. But like I said, we're looking at this main level here. One thing I do want to do quickly is just go to our 4-hour candlestick, and you'll see the same sort of thing just on a higher time frame. But this does change things. So the reason I want to go and show you our 4-hour after we've just done a lot of analysis on our hourly time frame is because on our hourly time frame we're seeing that higher high and higher low structure form. But as you know, and if you're new, I'll go over it again. The higher the time frame, the stronger the information. So the higher the time frame you're looking at, i.e. the monthly time frame, the information is very strong in comparison to your 1 minute time frame. So with that being said, on our hourly time frame, we notice higher highs and higher lows formed throughout this entire level, solidifying our sort of intraday bias that price was going to keep on moving. However, if you look at our 4-hour time frame, you can see that we had a complete break of structure of these two resistance points, and price continued on bullish overall and created a higher high and is now creating a higher low. So with that being said, we are also testing as support on a previous resistance level, or sorry, a previous support level. So price broke structure of a resistance. We've come back down to test it as a support now. And that we class as a sort of, this is the break of structure, and then we see the break and retest pattern. So again, confluencing the 4-hour time frame back down to our hourly time frame. With the hourly time frame, we've understood that there's big exhaustion wicks, indicating to us that the sellers are running out of steam essentially, and the buyers are now stepping back into the market. It's probably due to that 4-hour price action. Now, if we drop down to our minute 15, you'll see it a little bit clearer that the sellers are trying their utmost very best to push price further down and past this point of interest. However, the buyers are still here and definitely still present, showing no weakness towards the sellers. However, there is one main thing that we need to see here. So as you can see, price has formed this sort of overall resistance. We can drop down to our minute 5 and you'll see it a little bit clearer. So you can see that we have this resistance level here that price is constantly trying to break through. And then obviously we have this support level that price was also trying to break through. What we will need to see for that bullish continuation to happen on the overall higher time frames is we need price to break this level here. We need price to sort of start trading anywhere sort of around 4,456 inside normal price action. The reason why I say inside normal price action is because there could be an economic news event that pushes price all the way up here, and then we see a correction, and that's not normal price action. So it's not something that we're going to take into consideration or base a trade-off. But if we see a break of this level, then we're going to expect price to continue on a bullish fashion and then push somewhere to that 4,500 level that we spoke about in our previous video. However, if we do see this level broken through and we see these lows cleared, as there is resting liquidity below these lows, if we see that swept, we most likely will see that hour 1 time frame head and shoulders pattern that we just marked out succeed, and then the bears will push price sort of down to around 4,500. So the main point that we're looking at right now is anywhere in this price here. So anything from sort of around 4,430 to around 4,445. So within that sort of range, we're looking for price to break out of one side or the other. But as you can see at the bottom right of my screen, it is 10 past 4 p.m. GMT. So volume will start slowing down somewhat, but not too drastically. So we could definitely see the move. But what we could potentially see is we could see this overall consolidation continue for a little while before we see a break of structure, either to the upside or to the downside. So with that being said, that's pretty much it for our midweek technical analysis. Nice and very interesting analysis. There's a lot of there's sort of no real probable conclusion. There's no saying really that the price is going to continue bullish or price is going to continue bearish from this point. But one thing I will say that sort of tips the scales is that 4-hour time frame. You can see that price has just broke structure. We've seen a break and retest pattern on a higher time frame as well, so the information is very strong, and we are obviously holding up as a support on a previous level that we've noticed price test as a support. So that sort of tips the scale in terms of bullish versus bearish, and I will end this video with saying that I do expect overall in the higher time frames price to continue bullish. But we definitely could see some sort of rejection to around that 4,400 level. The reason why we have that 4,400 level is because we established it in our last video, and if you look, it will be somewhere around here, but you can also see that that's where price has tested as a resistance previously and a support. So definitely a level to look at if price does continue bearish from this level, to be that sort of that support area where we could still see price continue overall on the higher time frames bullish, but just that sort of like final level that could potentially give us that continuation. Obviously, if we see that 4,400 level broken through, then we'll re-establish, we'll reevaluate, and we'll probably accept that price will push down to somewhere around here. But for now, let's just focus on the area we're in and see what happens. So I will be catching you guys in our post-week market review, which will be posted either on Saturday or Sunday at some point during the day. So make sure you stay tuned for that video, as it will be a very cool breakdown to see what has actually happened within the markets. As always, I hope you have all enjoyed these videos. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Don't forget to leave me some comments below on some video ideas, things that you're enjoying in these videos, things that you don't like in these videos. I really appreciate it. I've got a few ideas from our last video. A couple of you nice people left a couple comments, and we are looking into doing some videos based on around those. But just drop some more. Keep going with those video ideas. It'll be nice to have a big list, because then you guys can start getting extra videos instead of just technical analysis stuff. So yeah, as always, I hope you've all enjoyed, and I will catch you in our post-week market review.